Hi there and welcome to the Die House Drumworks. The concept that we're going to look at today is sight reading. Now, I think certainly for a lot of musicians this can be a bit of a turn-off. So what I would suggest is that if you want to tackle this today, make sure that you watch this video from beginning to end. If you're kind of not in the mood for dealing with something a little bit heavy, a little bit challenging, it won't take that long, it won't be that painful, but put yourself 10-15 minutes aside another time. So this isn't something that you should rush through. When you're learning concepts like this, it's worth getting it right the first time because you're going to use it all the time. So be patient, learn it once and learn it thoroughly, it's definitely the best way to go. Okay, so for the hardy of you who are going to stick with it, the first thing that we're going to look at, I'm kind of working from the Rockschool, the new debut grade syllabus book, but this will still be relevant to anyone who's just starting out learning to read music at a very basic level. What we're going to learn first is the concept of a particular note value. Now we'll come back to the specifics of this a little bit later. We'll do this more on a need-to-know basis, I think, for this particular exercise. First thing we're going to learn is what this is here. Okay, this particular beat. This is what we call a crotchet beat or a quarter note. Okay, it's got a coloured-in note head, so you see it's got a big black dot there and a stem. There's no beams joining it to the next note. There's no tails. It's just a coloured-in note head and the stem. And the stem is the bit that goes up and down. It's what we call a crotchet. That's sort of more the orchestral term. We'll also call it a quarter note, which is probably a little bit more of a sort of an Americanization, more modern sort of terminology that we would use. So that's going to be our standard unit of note measurement here. The time signature that we're going to use, again, is the most common time signature that we're likely to come across in a lot of rock and pop music, certainly in the sight reading examples at this level. We're going to use a time signature called 4/4. And what that means is that there are 4 of these quarter notes, or 4 of these crotchets in every bar. Now that's the main pulse within the bar. We'll also sometimes see in some books, rather than 4/4, we'll have a big letter C at the beginning. So it's the most common time signature, hence common time, so C's for the common time. We're also going to talk about tempo. I don't know whether you can see that. But we're going to talk about tempo. The tempo that we're going to use for this exercise will be 80 crotchets a minute. Now, what that will mean, what you really want to do when you're playing these kind of exercises is try and use a metronome if you can. So you set your metronome to 80, press play, and what that will do is your metronome is going to click 80 times every minute, and that's a standard unit of tempo measurement. Crotchet equals 80, so 80 crotchets per minute. It's not always the case. We might have different tempos, it might be faster or slower. We might also have the tempo expressed as a different note value, but we'll come back to that later. For our purposes, we're going to use a number of crotchets per minute. Now, one of the most difficult things I think for drummers to get a handle on is that different note values last for different lengths of time. The quarter note, or the crotchet, which is the one that we're starting off with here, lasts for 1 whole count. So what that means is that each of these metronome clicks will have 1 snare drum beat. So 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So what we have to imagine is that if we have a crotchet beat on the count of 1, is that it actually lasts until the count of 2. Now on a snare drum, it doesn't really. You get that quick transient note and then it disappears. If we were playing a trumpet and we had a crotchet on the count of 1, ba, we blow it to the count of 2. So it will last until the count of 2. So it lasts for that whole pulse. So the count of 2 would last until the count of 3. The count of 3 would last until the count of 4. Then the count of 4 would last until the count of 1 in the next bar, etc. as we go through. So we have to imagine that the quarter note or the crotchet lasts for a whole count, and that's essentially what defines what the crotchet is. So we talked about time signatures, we talked about tempo. These can vary, but say for our purposes, we'll go at 80 crotchets a minute to start off with. The note value that we've dealt with here is the quarter note or the crotchet, so each one lasts a whole count. The next thing we're going to look at here are rest values. So for every note value, there is an equivalent rest value, which tells us that we don't play for that length of time. And that's what this little squiggle is here. When you see them printed, they look a little bit different. Your best bet is obviously if you've got the book, you'll see it's, if you turn to the sight reading page, which is page 29 in the new Rockschool book, that's the 2012 syllabus. Go to the sight reading page. The second event, if you like, in the first bar, it's like a little bolt of lightning sort of shape. It's a crotchet or quarter note rest, so it tells us that we don't play on that count. So the little exercise that I've written up here on the board, we've got 4 crotchets in the first bar, which makes up our bar of 4/4. In the second bar, notice that we've got these bar lines separating off the bar. In the second bar, we've got 2 crotchets at the beginning, then a rest, and then a crotchet at the end. So we've got all 4 events to make up the bar of 4/4, but we've got a rest on the third count. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So if I was to play that second bar on the snare drum, 1, 2, 3, 4. So we just leave a space where the count of 3 is. We've got to make sure that that rest lasts for the same length as the beat that would be there. So not 1, 2, 3, 4. We don't rush into the next beat. 1, 2, 3, 4. And that's where your metronome can be really useful. So if we set that running, I'll play the whole exercise. Here we go. 1, 2, 3. Just got that little gap there. Coming back to the Rockschool book, page 29, here's the sight reading test. I'm going to tap this one out with the metronome. Now there is a little change at the end of the bar, which comes on to the next thing that we're going to talk about in terms of note values. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 4. So you may notice in the end bar, the little note just slightly sped up there. What that relates to is the fact that quarter notes we can split in half. So we can get eighth notes essentially. So think of the fractions. Quarter notes split in half, we get eighth notes. What that does is introduces a count in between which would be the count of and. Now when you're playing basic rock rhythms, and 2 and 3 and 4 and, this would be the value normally that we would use on the hi-hats. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and eighth notes or quavers. So once again, 2 names for the same note value, quavers or eighth notes. They are defined on the page differently to crotchets by being joined with a beam. So again, if we look at the book, you'll see that there's a beam joining the 2 notes together. So beams go across. The stems of the note go up and down. Think of a flower stem, goes up and down. And beams, if you think of those holding your ceiling up in your house, beams go across. 1 and 2. So we get this and count in between. If we have one quaver on its own, it has a tail. So if we had a quaver just on its own in the bar, there's your note head, there's your stem, it would have a tail. So if you imagine that that's representing the beam that it would have been joined to the next note with. Now we'll come on to those a little bit later. At this level, if you can get used to just following pairs of quavers or groups of quavers with a beam joining them together, that's absolutely fine. So hopefully that will get you started with some of the sight reading exercises. It'll also help you through some of the pieces that you'll come across where the rhythm's a little bit more broken up. Most of the time we're going to get in the patterns this regular eighth note count, but occasionally we go to quarters. So just got to remember to keep the tempo consistent and just think of the length of the length of the note itself. So the quaver is half the length of the crotchet. So the eighth note is half the length of the quarter note. So time signatures, 4/4, that's going to get you through the early grade stuff. Most common times in church, so we get that letter C sometimes, common time. Tempo can vary, but is normally expressed as a number of crotchets per minute, not beats per minute, crotchets per minute, because that can change. Beat is a little bit non-specific, so 80 crotchets per minute. Note values, quarter notes or eighth notes, crotchets or quavers. Crotchets last the whole count, quavers last half the count. Rest values, so we can have a rest which lasts for, depending on what rest it is, I'll show you the quaver rest while we're here. So if we have a single quaver, there you go, lasts half a count. The quaver rest, sometimes called a balloon on a stick. It looks much like a balloon on a stick, but it depends how it's printed. A quaver rest, but we'll come back to those a little bit later, probably in the next reading lesson. So, hope that's been helpful. Good luck with your sight reading.